Home buyers are in full control of the Abbotsford Detached and the Abbotsford townhome market. If you're looking to upgrade from a condo to a townhome or a detached home, you have a lot of options to choose from. In today's video, I'm doing a deep dive on the Abbotsford Detached market, the East Abbotsford Detached market, the Abbey townhome, and the Abbotsford condo market. Watch till the very end because I'm going to share an important tip that will help determine if this is the right time to upgrade for you. Let's dive in. Let's start here. In March, the Abbotsford Detached market represented a balanced market with a sales to active ratio of 15.4%. This was up from the 10% that we saw in February. In March, the Abbotsford Detached market entered balanced territory, meaning we're in a balanced market. And in February, the Abbey Detached market was in a buyer's market. As a home buyer, you probably like this number. Months of inventory right now sits at 7. What this means is 1 out of 7 homes listed every month are selling and 6 out of 7 homes are not selling. That's up from the 6 months of inventory that we saw in February. And in my professional opinion, we're going to continue to keep seeing an increase in months of inventory as we head into the spring market. In March, we saw 52 sales, and that was up from the 32 that we saw in February. As a home buyer, this is good news. The average sale price for an Abbey Detached home sits at $1,091,000. That's down from the $1,107,000 that we saw in February. Days on market right now is 14, and that's the same as February. We saw 139 new listings in March, and that's up from 126 that we just saw in February. This number is really interesting because right now home buyers have 338 homes to choose from. That's up from the 319 that we saw in February. And one thing a lot of home buyers might not know is 25 to 30% of the overall inventory of detached homes for sale is homes that are rented out or tenanted. In some scenarios, there could be a real buying opportunity where you're looking at buying a tenanted property where the landlord is someone maybe that needs to sell because their mortgage is coming up for renewal, or they can no longer hold or afford the monthly mortgage payment. That's something to keep in mind. Next, let's move on to the East Abbey Detached market. The East Abbey Detached market represented a balanced market at 19.8%. That's up from the 15.7% that we saw in February. Months of inventory right now for the East Abbey Detached market sits around 5, and that's up from the 4. So what this number means is every month only 1 out of 5 homes listed are selling and 4 out of 5 are not selling. We saw 25 sales in March, and that's up from the 17 in February. In March, the average sale price is around $1,116,000. That's down from the $1,186,000 that we saw in February, which is kind of good news. We saw 58 new listings in March, and that's slightly down from the 59 we saw in February. As we head into the spring market, we expect this number to keep increasing. And the active number of homes listed for sale sits at 126, and days on market is 14. Moving on to the Abbey townhome market. The Abbey townhome market sits in balanced territory with a sales to active ratio of 18.1%. That's up from the 11.7% that we saw in February. Months of inventory sits at 7. That's up from the 6 months that we saw in February. One thing to keep in mind here, folks, that a lot of people don't know is there's actually a lot of pre-sale and new development taking place across Abbotsford. If I had to guess at this time, there's probably 4 to 5 new developments that are happening where developers are trying to sell product. That includes the townhomes being built on Macmillan, Cooper Meadow, High Street Village, and there's a few more across town. In March, we saw 40 sales for Abbey townhomes, and that's up from the 23 in February. Good news is the average sale price is down month over month. In March, the average sale price sits around $608,000. That's down from the $630,000 that we saw in February. Days on market is 27, and that's down from the 38 days in February. Right now, the active number of listings for Abbey townhomes sits at 221. That's up from 196. So new listings in March was around 108, and that's up from the 83. in February. Next, let's look at the East Abbey townhome market. The East Abbey townhome market represented a seller's market with a sales to active ratio of 37.5%. As a buyer, I wouldn't be too scared of this, folks, because part of the reason why sometimes these stats can be skewed is maybe majority of the sales that took place for the sales to active ratio might be the $600,000 to $700,000 price range, where buyers could face competition when they're looking at complexes here that are highly desirable. Months of inventory right now sits at 4.8, and that's down from 5.3 that we saw in February. There were 18 sales in March, and that's up from the 8 that we saw in February. The average sale price for Abbey townhome now sits at $680,000, and that's slightly up month over month. Days on market is 27. Active listings right now sits at 48, down from the 50 that we had in February. But the number of new listings in March was at 30, and that's up from the 25 that we had in February. So right now, one thing that you got to keep in mind is if you're looking to upgrade to an Abbey townhome, yes, the number of inventory is increasing, but because there is a lot of demand for those folks that are looking to move or relocate to that area, you got to make sure that you do some preparation ahead of time. If the right unit becomes available, you can go ahead and submit an offer if you're interested. Another thing that we saw in March for the Abbey townhome market is we know if a unit is priced well and the presentation of the home is really well, it will sell quickly. We had a townhome listing here in February that we sold on the first day on the market. Then we had another one we sold within 9 days, when average days on market around the time was 25. Moving on to the Abbey condo market. The Abbey condo market represented a high balanced market with a sales to active ratio of 20.5%. That's up from the 19% that we saw in February. Months of inventory sits at 6 months. In March, there were 55 sales, and that's up from the 47 we saw in February. And the reason why we're seeing an increase in sales for condos is for two reasons. The first is the number of first-time home buyers are getting more active. And the second thing is people that are downsizing, where they're selling their detached townhome, want to move into a condo and stay here in town. The average sale price for a condo right now sits at $411,000. That's up from the $393,000 that we saw in February. Days on market is 23. And the number of new listings that were recorded in March was around 140. And that's up from the 95 that we saw in February. And we expect this number to keep increasing. And if you look at it, this is the most new listings that we've had since May of last year, which is again around the spring market. And the active number of listings sits at 268. Remember, beginning of the video, I mentioned I would recommend one tip that would help determine if this is the right time for you to upgrade. Here it is. If you're a young family and you're outgrowing your current space because you're expecting a baby or you had your second child and there's limited space in your condo, there's one tip here that will help determine if this is the right time for you to make a move. The first step is getting pre-approved and speaking to your mortgage specialist. Here's what I mean. Talk to your mortgage specialist and ask them how much of a mortgage you qualify for and what your monthly interest rates. Once you speak to your mortgage advisor, you'll have a clear idea regarding how much of a mortgage you qualify for and what your monthly mortgage payments might look like for your next place. That's not it. One thing extra that you want to ask your mortgage specialist is if you can port your current mortgage to your next property, especially if you're on a fixed mortgage. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking to a couple of sellers that want to sell. One thing that stops them from making a move is that they're on a fixed interest rate and they don't have the ability to port their mortgage. Once you have a clear idea regarding how much of a mortgage you qualify for and you're pre-approved up to, and if you have the ability to port your mortgage, you want to take this one step further. You want to get a home evaluation done for your condo. You want to know how much your home is worth in today's market. When you guys contact me and my team, one thing that we'll do is we'll do a walkthrough of your condo and we'll give you guys an in-person home evaluation for your home. This will account for things like the floor plan, the living space, parking stall, storage locker, and the list goes on. But here's why you want to know. Once you get the home evaluation, you'll have a clear idea about what your home is worth in today's market, and more importantly, how much money you would net from the sale. So this gives you a full picture of knowing whether it makes sense to upgrade or stay. If you're thinking about upgrading to an Abbey townhome, there's certain types of townhomes that you want to avoid. That's why you want to watch my next video, because I walk you through a list of things you want to avoid when you're buying your next dream home. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts about what's happening in the Abbey detached, townhome, and condo market. If you found today's content valuable, please go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe button. I'm Gary Dhindsa, and I'll see you next week.